Welcome to the Mix Minus podcast. I am Matthew McQueenie, and with me for another year, they get more fun each year, I think, is Matthew O'Daniels to talk college football bowl season. Isn't it weird to have all these years behind us?
Matt, thanks again for having me on. Always look forward to it. It is a bit strange as I guess the time keeps getting faster, but pretty excited for this bowl season. Thanks again for having me on. Always look forward to it.
Of course. So I think what we'll do, because in the past when we made the amateur mistake, we would start from the first bowl and go all the way till the end. And much like the committee decided to move away from my bugaboo, which was the New Year's Eve games on my anniversary. I've always been talking about that. I don't have to worry about that anymore. We're not going to start from the beginning. We're going to start at the big games, and we'll work our way backwards from there. A lot of different subjects going on. It is a great time to talk college football, and I think we didn't talk as much about it this season, which makes this podcast that much better because we have a lot in reserves to discuss. So the two I want to say that I'm most annoyed about not being in the playoffs, and they didn't deserve to be there based on what the other teams did, USC and Penn State. I wanted those two teams to make it. I loved what Saquon Barkley was doing, and they really looked poised to make it. They were up on Ohio State in that game in Ohio State, and J.T. Barrett made an amazing comeback, something I didn't see that he really had in him, but he did it. It was magical. It was his magic moment. And they could have survived that because then Ohio State went and lost somehow in Iowa. And by the way, Penn State had a real close call in Iowa too. So Iowa for a 7-5 team, right? I mean, they had some weird moments, which is strange. But Penn State then went and lost to Michigan State, and I was really, really bummed about that because I wanted to see them in there, and I think you can talk most to USC, but I wanted USC in there because I wanted Darnold in there, and they had a couple of really tough losses. The Notre Dame was a brutal loss, but I've kind of gone back and forth with Darnold whether he actually raised them up to be the team they are with the amount of wins they have as opposed to he didn't live up to the moment. I think he was carrying a little bit of a lesser than roster against some of these other teams. There were also some interesting upsets, including with them on Friday nights, so I don't know how that plays into things. You know, the Clemson game was a Friday when they lost to Syracuse, but what do you think of those two in terms of my snub list?
I think you've got a great case for it. Once again, proving that, and it's going to be a process, but once again, the conference champion proving, at least in the Big Ten, proving once again that doesn't matter to get into the playoff. But I did think the committee did it right. But to your point, Penn State looked great, but then they just, Ohio State just had that magical game to beat them. And going forward, I think obviously there's going to be an expansion to the games and the bowls. Probably go 8 games, which makes yesterday's Army-Navy game. There's going to perhaps going forward. Yesterday you have the Army-Navy moved up to maybe 12, and then you have a 5 and an 8, quarterfinal game. But that remains to be seen. But I think they should do that because Penn State. I mean, I think unless Chris Peterson pulls out something magical, I think Penn State should throttle Washington in the Fiesta Bowl. And I agree with your point. I think the injuries really hurt USC this year, and Darnold did carry him. I mean, he's fun to watch. Personally, I think he should stay another year, but that's because I'm a Trojans fan. He probably is going to leave, but. To your point, those Friday night games after a road game on a Saturday, just kind of, they didn't get killed up in Washington State. The Trojans didn't. They only lost by 3 up in Pullman. But to your point, Clemson has to go to Syracuse, and they lose on a Friday night as well. So that's a little bit of a, and Francesa always says Friday night for football, for high school football, Saturdays for college football, Sundays for the NFL. But those Friday night games, I don't like them either, but I don't know. I think moving forward, they're eventually going to expand to the 8 teams. But we have what we have, and it's going to be Pac-10, Pac-12 versus Big Ten. And I think Washington's in for a tough fight. I think McSorley and Barkley. And Penn State's just a really good team. I don't see I mean, if I'm a better, I mean, I'd take the 2 points or whatever moving forward with Washington, but I think Penn State should handle Washington. And the Ohio State USC game, I don't know. It's one of those deals where, as a Trojans fan, like you mentioned, they got throttled up in South Bend, but that was their only bad loss. I mean, they had a few tough games.
They pulled some out of their butts too.
Oh, they had no business. I mean, Texas manhandled them.
What a great game.
They manhandled them. They pushed them around the whole time. I was at the Cal game up in Berkeley. That was too interesting. So there were a lot of games in conference that the Trojans just made a little bit. But you know what? Injuries happen. You have to get over that. I think the line's a little high at 6 or 7, but I don't know. I mean, if I'm a Trojans fan, I'd take the points because you really have nothing to lose. But Ohio State is so dangerous that they could beat anybody on any day, and they showed that with the comeback win, especially against Penn State.
Joe Thomas, the longtime offensive lineman for Cleveland, who had a Ironman streak until this season. He's become like a great little Twitter presence, and that was one of the first places where I saw the expanded to 8 teams, and I kind of liked his idea. It was the 5 conference champions in the Power 5, and then 3 at large. Who would be in the 8 this year, do you think, if it was that?
Well, like you mentioned, I think it would be, well, obviously you're 5, and then the teams left out, I would say Penn State. I would say Alabama.
But what about Wisconsin? Isn't it tough though? Wisconsin, you almost don't want him in there because so right now the 1 through 8 actually in the ranking that I'm looking at, and maybe I should look AP top 25 here. It's Clemson, Oklahoma, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Auburn, USC, with Penn State on the outside looking in. How about how about UCF number 10? Wow.
Exactly. I think you throw them in there, like similar to like a few years back with a Utah or a Hawaii or a Boise State. If you have a team that's undefeated, I mean, you might as well. I don't think there's no reason if you're undefeated, like a UCF this year, there's no reason that they shouldn't be able to at least play. Whether it was like I said, Hawaii or Boise State in years past, but yeah, to your point, I think Auburn.
Yeah, Auburn beat 2 of the teams that are in the playoff, and then, obviously it's unfair almost to have to play Georgia again when they can look back at the tape, but they beat the 2 teams that are in it, and they had if they didn't have that brutal loss to LSU, it's a kind of a different story maybe.
It's tough. Yeah, exactly. And it's that's what makes it so interesting and the back and forth. And like I ran into an Ohio State fan. They're all over the place down here in Charlotte. You can't every street, every license plate. People are wearing Ohio State gear all over the place. Like they come out of the woodworks. But an Ohio State fan came up to me. I was wearing my Trojans hat, and he's like, "Oh, looking forward to the game." Well, you know what? The Trojans have beat Ohio State the last 7 times. So, I mean, if you just look at the law of averages, I mean, Ohio State should probably win this game, right? They're due. But, yeah, it makes it interesting. I know Tim Brando 2 years ago had said that it's going to be moving to an 8-team playoff. And I think it should because, like, we have this open weekend and you have time to do it. But then the problem is then the scheduling and when do you start? There's a lot that they have to look at. But I don't think it's something they can't. Moving forward, organize. And I was at College Game Day 2 weeks ago in Charlotte, and I was talking to one of the ESPN higher ups at College Game Day, and we were talking about the same thing. There's moving forward, I think they're going to be able to expand it to an 8-team. It's just a matter of time, I guess. To me, it should be done, next year, but. I don't have a dog. I don't have really much say in it. But moving forward, I think probably 2 or 3 years we'll see it expand to 8.
So we're in a funny position because everyone thought it was going to be the New York Jets who would be in the spot with the high draft pick, and lo and behold, it might just be the New York Giants who would be in a position to pick one of these top quarterbacks. And I actually, shockingly, I think it was Bleacher Report, saw a mock draft that actually had Sam Darnold at 9 or 10, Josh Rosen at 1, and Baker Mayfield at 2. He's done a lot to kind of raise his stock. But I'm still focused in on Darnold. I don't know if it's being stubborn about going into the season, what I saw last year. And by the way, a little funny note, isn't it interesting the 2 teams that I would have liked to see in this were the 2 teams that played each other in that epic bowl last year, USC and Penn State. But what you've seen from Darnold over the 2 years. There was a period this year where his touchdowns to interceptions were uncomfortably close, and it looks like they evened out a bit. He's like 26-12, so he ended up in a good place, almost 3,800 yards throwing. What do you think about him as somebody the Giants might potentially look to put in there? And the beauty with him is I think Eli's going to hang around, so he wouldn't have to actually play right away. But what do you see from him when you think about NFL quarterbacks?
What do I see? Is I see someone who's not your typical NFL quarterback. I think like
in what kind of way? Like the Ben Roethlisberger way, or the
like I'm even talking about. I'd take Josh Allen over Darnold because of just the size, the drop back pass, like the ability to stay in the pocket. Like there's nothing wrong with Darnold, but he has, and I hate to use this word, escapability. And when he makes those moves, when he's outside the pocket, he's allowed to create, which I think is a completely different animal in the NFL. I think the ability for him to make plays like he does when he gets out of the pocket in college won't be available in the NFL.
Yeah, I guess there's some to that. And he might be the type of guy who doesn't quite look like the traditional body in terms of taking a hit. Like in the NFL, you get out that escapability, and one hit could end your season. And so that might be the issue. But there is something intangible about him. And he is taking a team in a major media market, in his home market, and really leading them. And I think that can't be denied sometimes. I
tell you what, though, I even look at Quentin Flowers from South Florida. I think he's a better a quarterback in terms of being, outside the pocket, moving around. I like him better than Sam Darnold, but that's just me. Moving forward,
is that because he's your guy? Is that because he's on your team and you see his foibles more?
Perhaps, and also. Yeah, I think so. And also, and I'm not here to rain on his parade or to knock him at all. He's a fantastic talent, and I love watching him. And there's also the selfish reason. I'd like to see him here for one more year when I go down to Austin, Texas next year. I don't know who the quarterback's going to be. I don't want to go in there without a quarterback. But the point is that when I compare him to even a Baker Mayfield, a Quentin Flowers, a Josh Allen, all the other quarterbacks that you look at, I just don't think maybe that translates. And I could be completely wrong, but I don't think it translates to the next level as I see with the other quarterbacks. I think, and I'm not taking anything away from his intangible that you had mentioned. He does have that special it or whatever, but I don't know if he gets away with some of his throws at the NFL.
So as somebody who's watched USC all these years very intently, can you take back to how you felt about how about in relation to Mark Sanchez coming out, in relation to Matt Leinart, in relation if you could go all the way back to
Rodney Peete?
to Carson. Who he won
Palmer,
the
yeah.
Palmer. Sorry, yeah. I'm thinking I had Wentz on my. There's a lot of Carsons now, but Carson Palmer. Who did you feel the best about leaving college? Probably Palmer, right? He had that real traditional feel. But what did you think about Sanchez? Because he ended up going to your team in the NFL, and even Leinart.
Yeah, it's funny. I thought Leinart would have translated really well. Obviously, it didn't, but he did have a fantastic college career, going 37-2 in the college ranks. This sounds really wrong, but I was kind of happy Sanchez was going because I wanted to see Mitch Mustaine play. But that didn't happen. We had John David Booty that year. I like Matt Barkley too, but I think if you rank it, is obviously Palmer, and then kind of everything else is a wash. I mean, you had Matt Castle, who was no one even saw
who was
him
a
play
backup in college.
No
Amazing.
Play. But then you could go back to Rob Johnson. I was watching some old Cotton Bowl highlights earlier in the week with Keyshawn Johnson. So all these quarterbacks, I mean, it's nice, but I think, and that's the knock on the USC quarterbacks, they don't do anything in the NFL, and that's fine, I guess, because I mean, that's not my deal. I'd much prefer to watch the Trojans, but I think Carson Palmer's the best one that they've had.
Oh my God, how about John David Booty, Cody Kessler?
Kessler,
I'm forgetting all these guys.
Matt Barkley, Mark Sanchez, Castle, Todd Marinovich, Rob Johnson. I mean, it's
funny. It's crazy. Yeah, it is interesting the way there's almost a USC premium put on these guys that puts an expectation out there that they can handle the NFL, because for many years they've had to be the NFL team in a major market up until last
the
year.
Rams, up until the Rams.
Up until the Rams. So maybe people get a little bit too much credit almost from that point of view, where they can't just be in the middle of Alabama or the middle of one of these other, even North Dakota State or Josh Allen in Wyoming. Like, maybe it gives those guys a better chance to kind of prognosticate who they're going to be at the next level.
I look at those USC quarterbacks, and I say to myself, how doesn't the University of Michigan, have a quarterback? The guy where Tom Brady went to school there. You'd think
they wanted to bench him all the time, and they always wanted to bench him.
But you'd think they'd have at least, especially with Harbaugh being there, at least they'd have some sort of stability at the quarterback position. And it's just one of those things that makes college football fun. You have all these interchangeable parts. You look at Alabama; they traditionally, with the exception of McCarron, I guess, because McElroy's not playing. They don't really have an NFL type quarterback. They're more of the bigger guys, the running backs, the linemen, what have you. So
we've had this discussion a lot where, as a college coach, unless you're at kind of a not major program, your best bet is to build through infrastructure and to not go all in on the quarterback, because you might have to spend too much time with him. And in college, you can win with a team. In the NFL, it's more you win with a quarterback. I mean, you look at a lot of teams in the NFL and think about the Colts, for instance. This is basically the same roster, whether they have Andrew Luck or not. Andrew Luck, who did play with Harbaugh. I don't know if Harbaugh actually recruited him or not, but Andrew Luck, when he's helming the team, all of a sudden they're in play for the playoffs. And when he's not, they're a joke. And they have a pretty good quarterback who they traded for in Jacoby Brissett this year, who's doing a pretty decent job. But in the NFL, a quarterback can make you. And that's why the coaches always want to get the quarterback, because it takes care of a big part of their job. In college, the quarterback is really an extension of the coach, and the team is almost what they build up. And you can win through a full roster, which is kind of fascinating. And I think if we kind of want to parlay that into our college football playoff, you're kind of seeing that with the first game, 5 p.m. New Year's Day, Rose Bowl. We're going to have Oklahoma and Georgia. Now, Georgia does have the freshman quarterback, right, Fromm, who has that big. Whenever I watch these highlights in ESPN, all I see is this documentary that I don't know if anybody's watching. And then Oklahoma obviously has the veteran, the wily guy who nobody really wanted to recruit and somehow kind of walked on at Oklahoma underneath their nose and then won the starting job. And he's a little petulant, he's a little crazy, but there's something about him. It's the moxie. He's got it. And he won the Heisman too. So that's going to be an interesting game, Oklahoma, Georgia, because you kind of have that team concept, even though they have the rookie quarterback or rookie freshman, and then you kind of have what is traditionally a team concept, but they have the quarterback. So it's going to be fun seeing star versus system, and I think a lot of people are missing with Oklahoma as well. Well, not people who watch, but yes, they have this great record. But man, the guts of their season when they actually not only lost to Iowa State, but there was like a 4 or 5 week period where every one of those games in conference was up for grabs. I know they beat Ohio State, big win, just as Ohio State beat them in Norman the year before. But that would kind of worry me a little bit for Oklahoma in this game.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, their defense is a concern because they're going to shootouts. I mean, I did the Oklahoma State. I did Bedlam. I
that was
covered
insane.
That game, and it's a video game.
It wasn't fun.
And that's cool. It's fun. It isn't fun. Yeah,
and they had Gus Johnson, right? They had Gus Johnson.
Yeah. They had Hollywood Brown, and it's one of those deals where if it does become a shootout, like there's no problem. I don't think there's any problem on the offensive end. It's just defensively, and Georgia's got a stable of running backs. They have the freshman Swift. They have Nick Chubb. They have Michelle, and then so it's like Georgia can. I think Georgia's defense is pretty good, so the Oklahoma offense to Georgia defense is going to be a fascinating matchup. But then when you flip it, it's Georgia's offense. They have a stable of running backs. They have the freshman quarterback, but I think they're really tough up front. And like you said, the Oklahoma defense is a concern to me.
What do you think? What are your thoughts on Baker Mayfield? I mean, he's 6'1". there's a lot of people looking for corollaries because he's going to be an NFL quarterback, and people are saying, does he go in the first round? Does he go in third or fourth? What's best for him? He's always been the underestimated guy who over-delivers. If he's the overestimated guy who under-delivers, that's where it's dangerous. But I don't think you know that because he's playing in the Wild West, where you don't get a true sense of these players because everything is offense, and he's really good at it. He throws a great deep ball. And I think a lot of people are wondering, is he Johnny Manziel or is he Drew Brees, who I think was also from Austin? And then I saw his coach, who's only like 34, Lincoln Riley, say he sees a lot of Brett Favre in him. And there almost is that because he's not really... Drew Brees is very mechanical, good, really good form, the way he goes back and he always throws it the same. Baker Mayfield's almost like Drew Brees married to Favre. Like he likes getting in the scrum and kind of throwing it deep and gunning it and gunslinging and all that stuff. But what do you think of him as a quarterback?
I think as a quarterback, I think he's a winner. Although, like you said, that loss to Iowa State at home was just a tricky one because he kind of
they weren't very good.
No, it's weird. But then, as a quarterback, you can only do so much. You have to ask your defense to make a stop here, especially at home. But moving forward, I think those comparisons are awfully. I tell you what, I'd rather have a Baker Mayfield seeing what I see than a Johnny Manziel, only because he looks a little bit like he looks tougher. He has probably more fun than Johnny, and I don't think. And I've heard things about Baker's family, but I just think moving forward, I think Baker Mayfield doesn't scare me as much as the Johnny Manziel. Drafting Johnny Manziel.
Well, I think Johnny Manziel was much more heralded too, and recruited. Right? I mean, Baker Mayfield. Think about a guy who goes to Texas Tech. He gets like no offers. And then he goes, yeah, I don't really like it here. And they drive up to Oklahoma and he just transfers and the team doesn't care. And all of a sudden the guy won the Heisman 3 years later. I mean, it's one of those crazy stories that you almost can't make up. It's sort of like the Favre story. Favre was much crazier, rolling into the town he did, to the college when he really wasn't even a throwing passer in high school playing for his father. And all of a sudden he becomes one of the great throwers in the history of the game. And I remember reading the Perlman book, and what was it? He beat Alabama, I think, in Alabama as a college player. He had all these crazy wins, and he was up and down and just all over the place. But there's something to be said about that. And maybe all these close games, these all kinds of games that Baker Mayfield plays, he'll roll into a city and just be ready to go. If I'm Cleveland, though, I'm really afraid of getting Johnny Manziel again. And so I don't think they go there. But Josh Rosen, I mean, everything you read and see about him, he's got a little bit of that too. You know, he's not amazingly buttoned up. He speaks his mouth. He parties. He does all that. Maybe not to the levels that Johnny. And Johnny got into addiction too, which that line, you can't always say he was addicted. That line can cross, as you know, and then you're a whole different person. So I don't even think Cleveland was necessarily drafting the guy where Johnny Manziel or the guy Johnny Manziel ended up to be. But yeah, I read the really good feature in Sports Illustrated from a couple weeks ago. Actually finished it today on Baker Mayfield. There's a part of you that doesn't want to root for him when you see on the shallow level the things he does. With the beating
guys in the end zone at TCU, and then he's doing the. But you know what? To his backup, I mean, the Kansas guys didn't do that. I did that game too,
including the kids.
Yeah.
Like that was lowbrow.
Yeah, like exactly. Go back. Where's Mark Mangino when you need him? But good point. I totally forgot to mention Josh Rosen. I mean, he's another guy who if you had to look at the the quote unquote standards to be met, the prototypical with the height and the weight and then the look and the makeup. I don't know. It's going to be interesting because this is a quarterback draft. There's a lot of quarterbacks to choose from, and it's going to be really wild.
The fascinating thing for Oklahoma is how did they go into Columbus and hold Ohio State to 16? I mean, 31-16. They didn't overscore, so they played a good offensive game against a really good defense, the defense that Shiano has with them, and they held what can be an explosive offense if it gets going to 16. That 31-16 is like a traditional regular season Clemson score, like when they beat a team. I can't even remember really how they kind of held it. Maybe it was more Barrett hurting himself or there's some timely plays, but that's kind of what they got to do in this next game. They got to win it 31-16.
And I'm going to be root, and see, it's funny. You go back to the whole point of being a fan. I mean, personally, I'm going to be rooting for Oklahoma. Baker Mayfield is fun to watch. I mean, he's got that whatever it is, it factor, and obviously he's good enough. He won the Heisman last night, but it's one of those deals where is Georgia's defense. I mean, people have been talking about Georgia's defense all year. They're really good, and do they grind on him? It's just it'll be interesting. I think Georgia comes out on top, but there's also that other thing, like Georgia's never played I don't believe Georgia's ever played in the Rose Bowl before. I mean, there's a lot of factors. We're 2.5 weeks away. It's going to be exciting. I'm going to be rooting for Oklahoma, but I think I'd be more surprised to see Oklahoma win than if Georgia won.
And I think you got to give Kirby Smart some credit for getting them to this level as quickly as he did, especially when it looked like the guy he replaced was going to have Miami passing them sooner with a kind of Miami's not a lesser program, but they had sort of fallen to a little bit of a lesser program than an SEC program. And he did come out on top this year with Miami kind of falling off and really having some issues.
And it's the Notre Dame factor once again. I mean, here you have a Notre Dame who year in, year out play a really strange schedule where they're playing heavyweights and then they're playing cupcakes, but they're still Notre Dame. And they barely lost to Georgia at home. They beat the crap out of Southern Cal, and then they get absolutely their doors blown off. I mean, I have a friend of mine, a Notre Dame alum, who goes to all these games, and he went down to Miami, and there was silence. I mean, Miami blew the doors off them. So yeah, it is interesting to see how Kirby Smart was a little bit quicker to ascend to the top than Mark Richt, where I would have thought it would have been reversed. Although Richt's right there. I mean, I talked to a lot of Miami fans last week down at College Game Day, and he's got it going on. Maybe a little bit sooner than they thought, but I think he's got the direction. They're going to be competing with Clemson for the ACC title for the next few years. And no one's quarterbacks. No one's talking about Lamar Jackson. It's incredible.
No, because you know what? They underwhelmed. Like, they never took the next step, and maybe that was because the roster doesn't match up to the level that Lamar Jackson is, and you can only carry a team so much in kind of hard conferences. But the thing I wanted to say with Oklahoma, they almost have to win this game to validate themselves a bit. They're getting a better draw than if they had to play Clemson or Alabama first, because I think that would be a real tough game to have to play first against, they could really neutralize. Because 2015, Clemson beat them by like 20.
And to your point, I didn't mean to interrupt there, but to your point, I think had the committee gone Alabama, Clemson in this on opposite sides of the bracket, then there would have been more questions, which I understand, but yeah, it is. I do agree with your point. I think Oklahoma has to kind of they need this to validate. I mean, I don't know. They won the Big 12 title game. That was great against a pretty good TCU squad. But when you look at them, it's just they're in shootouts all the time. Especially, most of their games are within 7 points, 8 points. Their non-conference schedule, I mean, they played UTEP and Tulane. I mean, whoop-de-damn do. Which makes the Ohio State game that much better. I mean, they went up to Ohio State. They played them. But I agree to your point. This is a big game for not just for them, but just for Big 12 football, too.
And I think the college football playoff needs them to win, because you really want Oklahoma and Baker Mayfield in that final. I mean, because
no one cares about an SEC title, right, like a Georgia. Yeah, it's the sexier matchup.
I mean, Oklahoma Alabama would be great, or Oklahoma Clemson I would take as a close second. But Georgia Clemson, Georgia Alabama is just not. It's not doing it for me. I'm not that excited about it. I'll still watch it, and it'll still probably be a really good game.
It's not. Yeah, it's not sexy.
So for the third year in a row, we got Alabama playing Clemson. So not in the final this time, but you get it. You still get it in the playoff. You got some rotating, some new characters. You don't have Deshaun Watson here. This one is going to still, I think, be as close as ever, though.
Yeah, and you know what? I had the opportunity. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it down to Clemson this year. just due to work. I had tickets to go down and see Clemson play Auburn and Florida State, but I had to vacate my appearance. Unfortunately, I really was looking forward to going down there. I think what no one's talking about is after that really strange Syracuse loss, which a lot of people down here, especially South Carolina fans, they loved it. Their defense really, like you just don't replace a Deshaun Watson, and he was a phenomenal talent. And I think here you got to look at Clemson's defense. They're just so big, they're so physical, and also, how about this? I mean, Lane. I hate to do this, but Lane Kiffin, Bama is 0-4 without Lane Kiffin in the bowl years, the past 5 years. In the Iron Bowl and in the postseason, Alabama is 0-4 without Lane Kiffin in the last 5 years. So that's interesting. But these weeks allow the teams to get healthy, to throw in that wrinkle. I think this is going to be an absolutely fun game to watch. I'm reading here that Clemson's given 2.5. I mean, I think it's even if you were betting. But then you have to look at Alabama's success rate in the Sugar Bowls. Not a nice place for them. They lost to Ohio State. They lost to Utah. Alabama's success rate in New Orleans under Kiffin isn't that good. So will they be able to get over that hump? I mean, I think they will. I think Jalen Hurts is a real mature quarterback, and I think I like Alabama to win this, but I'm going to be rooting for Clemson. It's just going to be a fun game. What do you say?
I think I kind of feel like having that loss at Auburn gets a loss out of their system. It doesn't have them riding into the playoffs overconfident, and it gives Nick Saban something to talk about and coach up for over a month, like a month and a half, right? It's a long point at that time. So they're having practices like a team who has everything to prove. And Nick has, probably beat them down and built them back up all the way. Obviously, Clemson had the one loss at Syracuse. And it's funny that Syracuse is an air raid light type team. So that could be interesting if Clemson does end up playing Oklahoma again. But I do feel like the loss makes me kind of hedge towards Alabama in this one. I think if Deshaun Watson were still there, I would say, I don't know. Because he was that transcendent as a college quarterback. And he did prove that he was that transcendent in the NFL, which is kind of a neat thing. Because I don't think everybody thought that was going to be the case. Kelly Bryant's been very good. And Kelly Bryant went out in that game against Syracuse, right? From what I remember, didn't he get hurt?
Yeah, he did. So that wasn't a help. It's just, and then you look at the law of averages. I'm just pulling this up, how often? I mean, I don't think. Just maybe I'm probably outside the box here, but I don't think Nick Saban's going to lose another Sugar Bowl. I mean, he's 0-3. He's lost to Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Utah there, and I don't know. He's probably due in the Superdome.
Yeah, I think so. And I think if we end up with the hard part of getting Alabama in is if it's Georgia, you'd rather, I think, Clemson play Georgia, so you have a little bit of spice there. If Alabama gets in, you want Oklahoma so bad.
Right.
But we'll see if they can do that. Do you want to quick hit through a lot of these quote-unquote insignificant bowls too?
Yeah, and it's no way to belittle anybody's season because college football is just so tough to go in, year out, which makes the Clemson-Alabama runs more special, or you appreciate it more. But, I mean, I like the fact that UCF, Scott Frost is going to be coaching against Auburn in the Peach Bowl. I like that. You know why? Because that doesn't seem to be the thing to do. Like Willie Taggart has gone to Florida State, so Cristobal has come in and he's going to coach for Oregon in the bowl game. So it's like the fact that Scott Frost said, you know what, I'm staying here, I'm coaching the bowl game. I like that just as a fan. That's kind of cool. So it'll be interesting to watch them play Auburn in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl on Monday, January 1st. I mean, Auburn's given 9.5, 8.5. I like Central Florida to cover. I don't know if they'll win, but that'll be an interesting game. That
could be a win-win for the Gipper. And actually brings a good point. What do you think a lot of the coaching transfers, which we see every season? So What do you think about Jimbo Fisher and that deal going to Texas A&M? That's a bunch of people who I think feel a little bigger about their program than it is, and I don't know if anybody could live up to that level.
Yeah, it's kind of like basically what someone did was that he got so big so quick, their expectations were there, and then he just never followed them after Johnny Football. I don't think Jimbo handled the things right. That's okay. It doesn't matter what I think, but the point is that there was a little bit of the money, and then I know Jimbo's son has some physical ailments or medical ailments that he said being in College Station would be better for him and his son to be closer to the better hospitals that are available to use in Houston for whatever his son is going through, as opposed to remaining in Tallahassee. That had something to do with it. But then Texas A&M, they come at you with money. It's kind of hard to turn it down.
Yeah, it's very hard to turn it down. But, if he doesn't start off hot there, the natives will get restless. And when you have that kind of long-term deal at that money, you can't go anywhere.
And I tell you what, and I almost tweeted, it's so weird. Like, I think Arizona State hiring Herm Edwards is good in theory. But when you have Chip Kelly coming to the UCLA, when you have Cristobal, who's just one hell of a recruiter, a guy who took Florida International within 2-3 years to a bowl game. Florida International, I mean, I know they're in the bowl game this year, but I think Herm Edwards basically going to Arizona State as not a swan song, but
it's like an emeritus. It's like an emeritus type thing.
And the AD was his old agent. I think it's good if you want your players, if you want your son to learn the right way to play football, fundamental football, go to Arizona State. But I think Herm's going to find out playing in the Pac-12 South, with UCLA, USC, Rich Rod at Arizona, and Whittingham up in Utah. I mean, it's going to be. I don't know. I'd be surprised if Herm stays there longer than 2 years. I think that was kind of like a good old boys thing that the AD did to hire Herm. But I think the Chip Kelly hiring remains to be seen. But it's a great move for UCLA, especially with the crosstown rival USC. I think Cristobal going to Oregon is a no-brainer. I mean, but then again, Taggart going back to Florida is a no-brainer. And then, someone going back to Florida is a good one too. And then, I don't know, there's just almost so much going on. It's fun to look at. And I think, Lane Kiffin, I think he stays at FAU one more year. I think because he goes from place to place year by year. No one really trusts him yet. So I think he stays at FAU one more year. Did you like any of the moves that were made? Not like any of the moves that were made? Well,
the whole McElwain thing was very weird at Florida, and then kind of musical chairs, Dan Mullen going over there. It remains to be seen. Florida is close to not being able to live on their past glory anymore. I think they're very close. They're very close to just being Tennessee, which brings me to the next thing. So Tennessee, I was kind of outraged by the Tennessee thing. I think, how dare a fan base not think somebody like Greg Schiano is worthy of their team when they had a Butch Jones before him and gave Butch Jones all of the time in the world. I think it gets real dangerous when you start letting a fan base who is built on delusions of grandeur to pick your coaches, because I think they got locked into a place where they did luck out and I think get a good coach here. But they were very close to striking out and probably having to get someone who was markedly worse than Schiano. I mean, we saw it at Rutgers. Schiano had Rutgers on the doorstep of being in the discussion. And what he did at Rutgers made them even be able to sniff the idea of being in a Big Ten. And he did a lot. Now, he failed in Tampa. He was not a head coaching. He was not head coaching material. But he's been at Ohio State. Ohio State passed all the checks they needed to, as did an NFL team, by the way. Passed all the checks they needed to about whether he was in the Sandusky pedophile ring or whatever, or he wasn't. But if he saw something, and the fact that Tennessee used that in part as some way to try to get this guy out of here, it almost felt like presidential politics. Like, it felt like, what was it, the Swift boating, remember, of John Kerry or whatever? Like, it felt too dirty because you just didn't think you liked the idea of a guy. When I truly believe that Greg Schiano would have been a stabilizing presence there, and he would have ultimately had them at the level that Tennessee should be, which, by the way, is an 8-5 team. Tennessee is not winning a national championship. They're not going to. But if you're an 8-5 team, if you're a 9-4, if you get up to 10-3 some years, you're playing in around New Year's Day bowls that are not the playoff, that is a really good season. And I think they lucked out, and I love how they all acted like, oh, this was our grand plan all along to get, Pruitt? As if like that was the plan, because go get him from the beginning then. So that's my feeling. What's yours?
I agree with you. But then, because T. Martin is our offensive coordinator, and there was some talks of him going to Tennessee, which we found out he's not going anywhere. He's staying as the offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach at USC. But he was their 1998 starting quarterback for the Volunteers. But I kind of like the fact, though, that I don't disagree with Schiano's ability and all of that, but it just goes to show you. I don't know. I kind of like that idea, though, that the alumni and the supporters and the fans, they do still have some say in what goes on. So I don't agree with Schiano getting snubbed, but I think it's only going to make, because I look at Tennessee in a certain light, and I think Schiano would have been settling for Tennessee. So I think actually this only makes his stock go up, and he'll probably get a better job, I think, which will be better for him. I think it'll be better for him in the long run, actually.
Well, you know who they get outraged about? And it's funny because they all wanted him, Lane Kiffin. That's who you get outraged about as a Tennessee fan. And all of a sudden, because they feel they have such a kind of inferior feeling, an inferiority complex at this point, that they're willing to take back a twice cheater, right, into the marriage. And I mean, I know, sure, maybe it's the time where he finally learned all his lessons and he'll be fine, but he still is Lane Kiffin. He's not. And he would use you again. And I couldn't believe that's the guy. That's right. That's the guy. That's the guy who you fight tooth and nail to be like, no, we're not going for him. Not Greg Schiano. That's the problem I had with it.
Yeah, it's just kind of funny, but once again, I love that it's different, and that that people who in the program, whether it's fans, boosters, alumni, they still have a say. And but I also think there were some dealings there because they did switch to Philip Fulmer. I think Fulmer had a big influence there too. But moving forward, it makes me think that, well, to your point, wait a second, where is Tennessee hiding all this hardware, Exactly. and then who are they? But it's just funny because now they did what they did. Now let's see what you guys are going to be doing in the future. It's fascinating.
Yeah, they Hail Married and somebody tipped it, and maybe they got to the 1 yard line with the Hail Mary. I mean, I don't know. I just think there's some karma too to this. I think you do the wrong thing sometimes, and it spits in your face.
I think there's a lot of that, and a lot of it remains to be seen. But it is kind of funny when you look at life just in general. You look at that. I kind of tend to really, really side with you there, but I'm going to keep my mouth shut and it just kind of sit back and kind of watch how it happens. It's kind of funny.
And I think you brought up the obviously Arkansas is dealing with being almost at the not also ran level, but they're not in the best place from a football program.
It's so weird, Arkansas, because that. I mean, before I moved down here. I went to the Rutgers Arkansas game up at Energy Point Solutions Stadium, and Arkansas was up.
Isn't it High Point now?
Yeah, I was up. Arkansas was up 3 scores. I think it was Bielema's second year, and Rutgers winds up and wins. And it's so weird that Bielema. It wasn't due to, I don't know what it was, but they just couldn't win. They could never seem to win ever. And it was weird because they had all the biggest offensive line. They were run football, old school. They have the resources, but they just couldn't, for whatever reason, get over the top. And it's too bad because I kind of was rooting for Bielema and Arkansas because of the style of football they played, and they just weren't ever able to kind of get over the hump. So that's to your point. It's kind of a similar job as Tennessee. I mean, Arkansas, with the exception of the Broyles national title, I don't really think I think they won their only championship in 1960. So I don't know, and I could be wrong there. They might win another one, but yeah.
Well, and like you said, the final one, just to hit home on that you had brought up earlier, but there's something that I liked about Scott Frost, this kind of Nebraska corn-fed looking guy, being in a place like Florida. Like I liked the dissonance of that. There's something about him. There's something about him rolling into Nebraska, and I like the idea that he was really tortured about it. Like he seemed to really want to stay in some ways where he was. I almost don't. I think him going back home to Nebraska almost feels a little like not as exhilarating as him being somewhere else.
It's almost like bummed. It's like, it's so funny. It's like, yeah, Nebraska is going to give you all this money. It's like he feels obliged because he played there and he's got a father, his family's from there and he won a national title up there and the whole nine. But it was funny. I read in the Orlando Sentinel, Scott Frost was quoted as saying, UCF has unlimited untapped potential. Well, that's the whole state of Florida for that matter. And then he said, when I retire, I'm definitely moving back to Orlando, Florida. So I mean, it's just, it's so funny how, and that's the other problem with Nebraska. I mean, with them moving to the Big Ten, it's just like, what are you selling the kids? Like, at least when you were in the Big 12, you could sell hey, we're playing Oklahoma, or hey, we're playing Texas, or, it's just one of those things where, I mean, yeah, you're going to play in a lesser East Division in the Big Ten, where maybe right now, traditionally, you're maybe playing the Wisconsin, who's tough. Whereas in the Big Ten, or in the West Division, in the Big Ten East, I don't know, I get so confused with the Legends and the Leaders Division. It kind of threw me off. But it's like, I just don't know what you're selling at Nebraska anymore. And that's kind of like an old argument since they did move to the Big Ten. But, what games are you selling them? Obviously, they're going to get better just because their division they play in that Big Ten West is not as good as, I believe, in the Big Ten East. But, it almost feels like a bummer. It's like almost like he's settling by going to Nebraska, where perhaps if he'd stayed at UCF, he could have taken them to new heights, built, had a better stadium built, the whole nine.
Well, yeah, and he was kind of tortured by it, which is weird. Like, he didn't quite want to go home, but it's kind of like when a parent gets sick and you have to go home. It's sort of like your program got sick and you kind of have to go home, and you kind of liked the person you'd become in the new place. And
right.
In some ways, it's almost like when Billy Donovan was leaving Florida. He had the whole press conference with Orlando. And then he's just like, on second thought, I really don't think I want to do this. I want to go back. And he had the balls at the time. I mean, that was gutsy. I mean, the fact that he ended up at Oklahoma City eventually, like, it worked out for him that he wasn't blackballed, but that was gutsy. I mean, people making calls like that. And I think that almost could have been like that with Frost, but it's almost the demand. And, and I think the other thing he's thinking is he's 42 years old and he looks like he's 32. And I think he knows this is it. Like, I'm going home. I'm going home to settle now. You're not leaving Nebraska once you go home, because where's he going to go from here? He either builds the program up, or he's going to have them at least being in the mix of being decent. They're not going to go 4-8, I don't think. But it's sort of, you're just going to be, mediocrity will keep him there forever. And I think winning is cool, but you'd almost rather win somewhere else. And I think this, ultimately what was at play here, and I play psychologist, but I know nothing about Frost, but he didn't want to go home because he knows he's going home for 25 years now.
Right. And that's why I brought up the quote from the Sentinel. It's because why would a guy say why would he be just absolutely loving on a place that he's leaving? It's so funny.
I know.
It's just, it's incredible, really.
All right, so December 16th is when things start. Exciting. We're less than a week away from that today. That'll be starting on Saturday, right? So December 16th, Celebration Bowl. So what I'm going to say about bowls like this, Grambling versus North Carolina A&T, you would say to yourself, wow, what is there to watch here in Atlanta? But a guy who's doing some stuff, I believe, in the NFL, didn't Tariq Cohen come from North Carolina A&T? or was it one of the other? And then a guy like Kareem Hunt came from Toledo. So these purportedly small colleges can churn out players who you're going to be seeing at the next level doing real things. That would be my one point. I know nothing about that game.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at these slate of games. I mean, Troy. I'm going to bounce around here. The New Orleans Bowl. You see Troy. They did win at LSU. I mean, so they're 10. They're 10-2. So
people from my company were at that game because there was a bachelor party in New Orleans, and several of the people from my company, they went over to Baton Rouge because they're like, oh, we'll go see an LSU game too, and they were at the loss to Troy.
Well, that's
crazy.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's actually really awesome.
Yeah.
But then I think the Las Vegas Bowl is the game of the day on the 16th. We have Boise State against Oregon. I mean, Boise State, gee whiz. I mean, there's another 10-win season for the Broncos. I mean, they kind of had a little tough time against Fresno, but we were able to win the Mountain West the following week, which was last week. And I don't know. I don't like Oregon, but I like Coach Cristobal. I think Mario Cristobal is a phenomenal recruiter. Him and Oregon, I think, are going to be perfect for each other. I hope I'm proven wrong, because Oregon is just it's kind of like what Chip Kelly did up there. I think Cristobal can do with Oregon. Not in terms of like the offensive wizardry, but just in terms of establishing roots and establishing a good program up there. So that'll be a fun game to watch, the Las Vegas Bowl. Nothing else really stands out to me. Moving forward, it would be the Cherry Boca Raton Bowl. We can have the
Bundy Tart.
Yeah, we have the Akron Zips playing Florida Atlantic, and I mean,
you'll get to see Lane, right?
Yeah. Lane is whether you like him or not. I mean, he just here we are. I'm talking about him, and it's not. It's just one of those things. He's like a polarizing guy, and his offense. The offense is really straight. I mean, they run the ball, they throw the ball. They are dynamic on the offensive end. Fun to watch. But I don't have anything else up until...
So that stadium is called, by the way, the Howard Schnellenberger Field? Did he coach at FAU before going to...
Yeah, he took the reins. He basically built that program.
Gotcha.
And he's but Terry Bowden is going to be coaching for the Zips, so maybe he has something to do with it. Maybe, it's funny. Terry Bowden, the from the Bowden family tree, and he's going to be coaching the Akron Zips. But moving forward, I just like those are
Louisiana Tech, SMU, the Frisco Bowl.
Love Louisiana Tech.
Well, SMU's head coach became the head coach at Arkansas, right? Isn't that the guy?
Yeah.
Do we know if he's going to coach?
Chad Morris. Yeah. Chad Morris, I believe that's a great question, because I've been hearing conflicting reports on whether or not he'll be coaching the Mustangs in the bowl game, or if he is going to be staying, in Fayetteville to go recruiting.
Right.
And I think he's going to be in Fayetteville, from what I'm hearing, though.
So December 21st, a hell of a mouthful. The Bad Boy Mowers Gasparilla Bowl. So Gasparilla is a big thing down there. I remember I did my 1/2 marathon I've ever done through downtown Tampa and down through St. Petersburg, through the place where he lives, and it was Gasparilla something. But the one thing I would say with Temple churns out a lot of pro players. More pro players. The Jets have one too, and Robbie Anderson, who's doing a hell of a lot of stuff. But they churn some players, which is kind of interesting.
Great point. And, Temple is, they're the University of Philadelphia's college team. I mean, Villanova might say something else for football. Maybe Villanova has something to say with that, because they've won national titles at the other division. But, I don't know. It's weird. I think it's tough to replace a coach that went ahead and left for Baylor.
Matt Rule. Yeah.
Good team. They're getting 7 points. I don't know. Perhaps Florida. I don't know. I think Florida International winds up winning. Unfortunately, did watch one of their games, and I just think because of the talent, I think they have more athletes there.
December 22nd, we have the Bahamas Bowl and the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. Wyoming in that game, which means we'll watch Josh Allen, who really hasn't raised up to, I think, the levels that people were hoping, but it's a good chance to watch him when there's only 2 football games going on that day. And I don't know much about UAB Ohio, but Ohio, do they still have the former coach?
Frank Solich. Yeah, he's still there, and it's good to see. It's good to see UAB back. They had their program taken away from them 2 years ago.
That's right.
Now they're back. I mean, it's just kind of stupid. Here they are, exactly, and I think I'm going to be turning back to that Wyoming game. I think if you're a huge NFL fan, you'll be able to see what perhaps like a showcase of what Josh Allen is going to be playing against Butch Jones' former team in Central Michigan. But I think it's this year for me. It's not as sexy as past years. But I'll be tuning in to watch that Wyoming game.
Well, it's fun locations too. The Bahamas and Boise. You couldn't have 2 more different locations. So almost for the aspect of watching the views and everything, could be fun. December 23rd, we have Texas Tech and South Florida. South Florida is the one with Charlie Strong, right?
Yeah, and they have that dynamic quarterback, Quentin Flowers. I mean, they lost to Central Florida twice this year. They lost to Central Florida in that heartbreaker of a game when they're on the road. I communicate with former South Florida quarterback Matt Grothy on a regular basis, and so he's been able to give me some more insights to South Florida. It's going to be, the over-under 67. I think it's going to be higher than that because, Texas Tech, like most Big 12 teams, throw it all over the place. So if you want to see high-scoring, high-octane offense, turn into the Birmingham Bowl.
Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Bowl, San Diego State at Army. San Diego State has something going on. Is it a coach or a player or a running back or something?
They have Rashad Penny, who leads he's just a phenomenal running back, and good for Army. I mean,
that was a good game yesterday. I usually don't watch that one, but the snow added an element that I thought was really cool and like
heartbreaker for Navy.
It was shocking how well that guy kicked it in the snow, though.
It was. I mean, you just feel bad for Navy because they come back after that long drive from Army. Yeah, tough loss for Navy, but great to see Army come back. They won the Commander-in-Chief's trophy last year. Army's +6. I don't know. It's going to be a contrast in styles. San Diego State won 10 games.
To say it lightly.
It's going to be a fun game. I think if you like football, I mean, actually, the 23rd isn't going to be bad. You have some fun games to watch. And, I don't know. I like San Diego State, but I'm going to be rooting for Army.
Did I ever tell you what happened when we went to the Army game like 5 years ago? I
don't believe.
So we took Melanie's aunt and grandmother, and her grandmother is like 90 plus, right? So she gets around though. But we didn't realize with the stadium up there, I think it's called Mikey Stadium, that we went up there, and I think they were playing Boston College, actually, which was kind of fun. But it is one of the all-time places to go see a football game. The views are just amazing. It's kind of an old, cool stadium. You have all the pomp and circumstance of the armed forces aspect. And so we get there, and we had seats pretty far up. There is no way to get too far up except going straight upstairs. So Melanie's poor grandmother, 90-something at this point, early 90s, so maybe 90, 91. She's walking up these stairs slowly, step by step. She's had knee replacements, all this. And it was kind of embarrassing that I didn't know this. And then this guy comes gunning down the stairs and gives her a hand and starts helping her get up. It was Teddy Atlas, the boxing announcer.
The trainer?
Yeah, the trainer.
The announcer. Oh, God.
He was the man. He goes to all these Army games, and he was just such a gentleman about it. And he even said, like, no, I'm doing this for me. It's not a big deal. You're really taking this. You're dominating it. No big deal. But he just rolled down from way up there and helped her come up. So that was a real cool kind of random thing. And then I remember looking at him, and it didn't hit me who he was first. And then when we were singing, it hit me. I go, oh, my God, Teddy Atlas just helped you go up. And she's like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. I'm like, no, it was cool. So that's Army. How about anything with Appalachian State, Toledo?
Yeah, I mean, Gary Pinkel's old squad that he coached over there in Toledo. But I like Appalachian State because they're just up the road in Boone, North Carolina, from where I live, and they're about 2 hours north of me, and it's they're getting crushed with snow and ice right now, but or over the weekend they did. They live just for the Carolina aspect. I'll be anxious to see, but they're going to be getting 7.5 points, so you expect Toledo to win.
Yeah, so we got Hawaii Bowl, which is always fun to watch for the views. Fresno State, Houston, the remnants of Tom Herman's team. He's in it, and Texas is in it, I think, but they were underwhelming in year one, I think. But this should be a pretty good game.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, Fresno State chomping at the bit there at 9-4. Tough loss up in Boise to the Mountain West champions last week. Houston throws it around, and I mean, you don't know what to. You expect the unexpected because it's Christmas Eve in Hawaii. Who knows what's going on?
December 26th, we have a couple of good ones: Utah, West Virginia, Duke. Well, I don't know if Duke, Northern Illinois. How about the fact Cutcliffe didn't want to go to Tennessee? Oh my goodness! And then Kansas State, UCLA will be really good to see Josh Rosen play.
Yeah, and then you also have. I like that Utah West Virginia matchup. I think Utah's defense has the ability to kind of put it towards West Virginia's offense. That'll be fun to watch. I'll be tuned into that UCLA matchup. And like I said, it's like Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, Darnold, Lamar Jackson, Quentin Flowers, Sam Bradford. It's chock full of quarterbacks loaded for this year.
Sam Darnold, you called him Sam Bradford. December 27th Bowls. We always like seeing the Yankee Stadium one. And Iowa, for an underachieving Iowa season, they had some big moments. And usually they overachieve against a lesser schedule and then fall in the big moments. But they had some big moments. They
really did. And going to be a fun. Now, have you been to a football game at Yankee Stadium?
No, I haven't been to football or hockey.
That's weird. It's like one of those things where I think it would be fun to watch a football game at Fenway Park or Yankee Stadium. Iowa, Boston College. I'm actually looking forward to the walk-on Independence Bowl. I really want to see. That's going to be up in Louisiana in Shreveport, and I want to see how Florida State handles Southern Miss. They're 6-6. Florida State. They're 15-point favorites, but what are they going to do? Do they go out and just absolutely dismantle Southern Miss? They were, we were talking Alabama, Florida State, national title game rematch, after their first game. And then here's Florida State playing in the walk-ons Independence Bowl.
In Shreveport.
Yeah, in Shreveport. That's a place where, I know my a guy I follow, Tim Brando, loves Shreveport, but, here's Florida State in Shreveport. So that'll be interesting, fun game to watch. Purdue, back in a bowl game, not to move it along, but they're going to be playing in the Foster Farms Bowl against Arizona. Arizona, they got Khalil Tate. I don't know. Have you seen Khalil Tate at all play this year for Arizona?
No, what's the story?
He is a just absolute – his breakout game was in Boulder, Colorado, against the University of Colorado. He's 19. He was 18 years old at the time. Backup from Inglewood, California, who UCLA and USC passed on, and so I guess he did enter this year as a sophomore to a backup, but he made his start against Colorado and he rushed for an FBS record 327 yards. It was just incredible. Wow. He won 4 straight Pac-12 Offensive Players of the Week awards, and he was this year's Offensive Player, Newcomer of the Year. Very explosive, very fun to watch because he can throw and he can run all over the place, very elusive. We'll see how Purdue will handle that, even though they are giving 4 points.
Texas, Tom Herman right back in Houston for his first bowl.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Playing a high-scoring Missouri team. The over-under, as I see, is 60.5 with Missouri giving 3. I'm anxious to see how Texas gets up for this game, how Tom Herman coaches this game, because Missouri, like I said, explosive on the offensive end. I would take the points with Texas, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Tigers win.
28th games. We have a couple of good ranking games. Well, a bunch of them actually. If we look at camping, Valero, San Diego County Credit Union Holiday Bowl. I know we talked before the season that Mason Rudolph was another player who was a potential quarterback. I haven't heard him a lot though. Once the season really got deep into it, but he is still quarterbacking Oklahoma State, if I'm not mistaken, and then Stanford TCU is a good game, and Washington State Michigan State is a ranked game.
Yeah, and when I look at those slated games, what jumps at me is the Stanford TCU game, only because it's what I look at the coaches. I mean, I look at Gary Patterson from TCU against David Shaw at Stanford. I think that game is, for me as a football fan, it's going to be kind of like a brainiac. I don't know. It's going to be fun to see how they play. And Stanford, really, had they not get stopped on that fourth down by USC, they could be perhaps the Pac-12 champions. SC did a good job of stopping the Cardinal there. But that'll be a fun game to watch. I'm gonna cue into the Alamo Dome, Alamo Bowl, and in the Alamo Dome. And like I said, Mason Rudolph throws it all over the place, slinging it all over against Virginia Tech. Pair of 9-3 teams should be fun. Oklahoma State giving 5.5. I'd take those points if I was Virginia Tech, or if I was had any money on the game. And the Holiday Bowl. See, the thing about Mike Leach and Washington State, in my opinion, is that, yeah, they beat USC and they're going rah, 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 but it's, Pullman, Washington, I think if they get to 10 wins, it's similar to Texas Tech. It's like you can only do so much at the program you're at. I think he doesn't go to Tennessee because that's not Mike Leach. Mike Leach is a Washington State, Texas Tech kind of guy. The Cougars to where they can go. I think a win here over D'Antonio and Michigan State in San Diego after all these weeks off would be a huge credit to him. But I look back to the New Mexico Bowl where a few years ago, Mike Leach kind of blew that game. So I would expect Michigan State here to win. Actually, I really love Michigan State in this game. But I'm going to be, secretly, quietly rooting for Coach Leach and the Cougars.
December 29th, we talked about USC, Ohio State. That's the game of the night. Anything else you like on the docket for that day?
I do. If you're a fan of big time defense, take a look at the Sun Bowl and watch NC State and the Wolfpack's defense. A lot of pro prospects on that defensive squad for the guys from Raleigh, North Carolina. Arizona State going through the coaching change. I don't think Herm's going to be coaching that game, but I would expect, NC State's given 6. I would expect NC State to throttle the Sun Devils at the Sun Bowl, and watch NC State's defense. A lot of great talent on the defensive end for the Wolfpack.
Nice. My favorite named bowl, the Tax Slayer Bowl. Always love that one. December 30th, we have a couple of ranked items, and then we have the Fiesta Bowl where we have Washington, Penn State. We talked about that. We have Miami, Wisconsin. Boy, talk about what at some point of this season, maybe 3 games ago, felt like it had the possibility of being a hell of a game, maybe even a playoff type game. And I am just not that juiced about that game now.
And which game is this you talk about?
Miami, Wisconsin, Capital One Orange Bowl.
You know what? It's so funny because I completely agree with you in that it's like an underwhelming bowl. You have Wisconsin and Miami, who, with the exception of Notre Dame, who Miami beat the crap out of. Who does Wisconsin, what wins do they have? I mean, normally when you look at big bowl games, you think about games and big games they won. This year, it's not like last year where Wisconsin beat LSU at Lambeau Field. I look at that game, and you're an alum. I couldn't agree with you more. They just, it doesn't do it for me. And I hate to say that, but you look at teams that are ranked 6 and 11, and it should be more attractive, and it's not.
I agree. And, there was a really good article in Sports Illustrated a couple months ago about Wisconsin and how well they recruit in-state and really only recruit in-state, and they get every player you can possibly get in Wisconsin. But there's only so much you can do with that, too. I mean, it's limiting in a little bit. And I think they couldn't have set themselves up any better, but you just knew the loss was coming. You knew, and there was a part of nature. There's a nature to college football too, where teams get the losses they're supposed to, and they get exposed even in one game, which keeps them from being in the playoff. Even in this 4-game setup, even though we're talking about winning 8, In the 4-game setup, the teams who are there should be there pretty much all the time. Because the teams right on the outside have that one bad night, that one bad day that just exposes everything. They get that one more loss than they needed to get, and Wisconsin only had the one loss to give. So you feel bad because they really play up as well as you possibly can as a program in a state like that. But you don't want them in the big games because you don't trust that they're going to give you a good game. So that can kind of be an issue. Now we're all the way here. So I think we said there was nothing else. Louisville, obviously seeing Lamar Jackson. Will he? Yeah, he'll play.
But there's one more thing. I wanted to go to that Notre Dame game. I know you kind of like that Notre Dame LSU game.
Oh yeah, where was that? Did I miss that? January. January 1. Okay, yeah, I was still on the 31st. So yeah, we can move to January 1, which is the last one on this list here. So yeah, like you said, what do you? Sorry.
No. What were you saying?
I was going to say I made this comment I think before the season when we had our podcast, and you were kind of you were a little down on it, but now you're kind of on my side with the whole thing with Michigan, why they can't just get a quarterback. It just doesn't make sense. They need a quarterback. They have to get one. Until they get one, they're just only so good. There's only so much you can do with just a defense. And he really it's funny for an offensive guy how well he recruits defense and how well he gets defenses to play, because it's sort of the way Harbaugh is. He likes to get in the scrum and almost get aggressive. He's like a defenseman, even though he was a quarterback. But you just want them to get it. They should be having a pipeline where they have 2 of them at any one time. So that's where I look. Until they have that, I'm always going to think Michigan is a step below. So that's where I run into an issue with them. For Notre Dame, LSU, they're both, it's another underwhelming bowl a little bit.
I don't know. The only reason I disagree with you there is because since 1997, it'll be the 4th time that these two match up in a bowl game. And I know that's over 21 years, but I mean, like, it's kind of funny. Like, they've kind of become like the default. I mean, LSU beat the crap out of them in 10 years ago, 41-14. And then I just remember 2 years ago in the Music City Bowl, Notre Dame beat LSU in a great game. It was 31-28, and it was just a very exciting game. I just wonder if LSU is going to get up. I don't know. It's underwhelming in that, like, kind of, but the only reason I say I'm excited about it is because 2 years ago in the Music City Bowl, it was an exciting game that went down to the wire to see Notre Dame win by 3. I think hopefully that it'll have the same kind of finish, or at least feel maybe towards the end of the game. It'll be a game where you watch and it'll be exciting to the end. That's what my hope is.
Well, it's funny. We almost say about, like, I don't know if we said it in this respect, but in some ways getting losses are like getting cheated on as a fan. And you're allowing 1 or 2 losses in certain situations to certain teams or for certain teams. And LSU, that loss to Troy was like the cheating equivalent in a marriage of being married for 1 week and the husband goes down to the coffee place and cheats at the coffee place before coming back home. Like, it was just a brutal, brutal loss. And it's one of those that Troy can live on forever, but LSU will live with forever. To have it at home, I mean, oh my goodness, that is a scheduling. That's like where Troy pays to be able to play there. It's just,
yeah,
it's brutal.
It's exactly what it is. And it is interesting to note that since 1995, Notre Dame is 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Notre Dame, how about this stat? Notre Dame is 4 and 12 in bowl games since 1995. That's just like, I mean, but once again, Notre Dame, they'll schedule anybody, they'll play anybody. I get that. But you just think, wow, I mean, they're 4 and 12 since 1995 in bowl games. So perhaps LSU looking to avenge their loss. But I don't know. I kind of like that game.
Yeah, and I think you said UCF Auburn, which I think we talked about, but that is a game to watch because I think that is 2 teams who have real stories. UCF being undefeated, Scott Frost leaving, so he built this program. Potentially, you said he is coaching it, or we're not sure yet?
No, he's definitely coaching it, and,
That's cool.
and Gus Malzahn will be staying for Auburn.
Right.
He's not. Yeah, so he'll be there coaching the Tigers.
So, obviously, it was at Auburn. That loss to LSU really kept them out because, man, to have two of your wins against 2 teams who are in the playoff is amazing. So I think both of these teams So Auburn's going to want to beat UCF because they're undefeated and they want to show they belong. And UCF is going to want to beat Auburn because Auburn is a Kingslayer or a tax slayer, So I think that game is exciting.
And yes, I do agree. And before I forget, since you did talk about Michigan, and since I live in South Carolina will be playing Michigan in the Outback Bowl on Monday, January 1st. I've got some friends going down to the game, and this is what's surprising because I watched South Carolina football. They're giving 7.5 points to me. That's too many points against Michigan. If I'm a bettor, I love this game. I take the points. I take the points and hope Michigan covers. Because I think that's just too many damn points that South Carolina is giving up. Both teams are 8-4, but South Carolina's 8-4 is like it seems more like a 6-6, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. I mean, it's sort of like when you're looking at an NFL schedule and you watch all the games, but you're not paying attention to the wins and losses, and you look at a team and you go, oh my God, there's no way that team is 7-5. Like
Philadelphia have no chance beating Seattle. I mean, they don't beat anybody, Philadelphia,
Yeah, well, except that one. But like Baltimore is a good example. Baltimore, I think, has been shut out 4 times this year, but somehow they're 7-5. Like, so you're used to seeing them get destroyed, but they find a way to survive and get enough wins to be in the mix. So totally understand that. So, we talked ourselves into, I think, a very enjoyable run here of games.
I'm excited. This is awesome. I love it. I can't wait for it. What a time.
So we'll maybe do our traditional checkup after the playoff games to talk about the final and maybe talk about a little bit of college basketball, which I've not watched, and maybe it'll be my impetus to watch. So, Matt, thanks for coming on.
Michigan State had a trouble with Southern Utah last night over in Lansing. So, college basketball is underway, and and just going to embrace the last week of Mike Francesa here on the Fan. I don't know what the future of the Fan is going to be, but it doesn't look good.
Oh, that's a good idea. Actually, let's finish on that. So, Mike Francesa. There's something to me about people who are day-to-day listening, and I like listening to what they have to say about what just happened. It's been hard for me to listen to the show in this run to the end because I don't want to hear him talking about things from years ago and,
I love it. It's fun.
But I like hearing what he said. Like the Eli Manning, I said that on one podcast, I said that was his Michael Jordan against the Utah Jazz shooting to win the championship over Brian Russell. Like, right. That was the moment. That was his great send-off. That to me was what I listened to Mike Francesa for. A lot of this like charmed life stuff with let's get this guy on, let's get I don't like it ending this way, even though this is how something should end. And I can't wait if he can get in the mix, whether it's a podcast or something. I want him back talking to callers about what happened last night, talking to media people, talking over media people because he actually knows all the answers, but he wants to get them on anyway. I mean, it is the greatest.
That's what's so great about him.
Oh, he's the best.
I don't want to interrupt, but crap.
In honor of Mike, please do.
It's so funny. It's just people either love him or hate him. I mean, as you know, I wasn't the biggest fan, and then I got on board, and then especially for me, I mean, Matt, when I had my job at Pearson Education from 04 to 05, 06, I would take my lunch breaks around
the 1 o'clock.
Mike and the Mad. I would go home. I was less than a mile from where I was living. I would go home to throw on Yes
to watch it,
the open of Mike and the Mad.
To watch the open of a radio show.
And then I'd go a broadcasting school, and there's no denying that Mike and the Mad Dog, they set the groundwork. They are number one. They are why there are so many radio shows on the radio now, and it's just interesting because, like you said, I think he will have a future platform. Just don't know what it is. But great point about but Mike would say he didn't push off though. With that last shot. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no. Well, yeah, and as Mike says, I have the flu every day too. So there is that. I do have one of the great. I just love hearing him talk about himself too. I'd recommend anyone listen to the Richard Deitch SI Media podcast because he had Mike on for like an hour, which is amazing. And he was just blowing smoke up his own butt, of course, and just there was a point where he was he was arguing with himself about whether he's number one in the ratings books during December, and he has to beat Christmas music. I mean, it's like who does this stuff? But that's what makes him great. And when you're in broadcast school, you can't even, like, you hold them to a high gold standard, but you can't even teach that because it's magic. It's alchemy, especially the two of them coming together. It was magical, and everyone tries to copy it. And all of these shows that are on ESPN or Fox, where they're doing this, they're doing these debates. It's not real. It's fake.
But the fans know that, though, and that's the great thing is that the fans know. Like, you can't force something, and the fans know. And that's why I really don't listen to any other shows. Well, times my uncle, like 10 years ago, was like big on Colin Cowherd, and
I like Colin. I like him. I like him by himself.
I do too.
Yeah,
I do. Yeah, exactly, by himself. But like with Mike and Doug, it was just I didn't realize, like, especially in the beginning. My point is, especially in high school when I started when you were a big fan and you were going to see him and stuff, and I was just like, I just don't get it. I'm more of a Beningo guy, overnight guy, lunch pail guy. But when you realize that Mike really does know his stuff, and especially this year with the Yankee playoff run. And then even this morning I tuned in. He was talking about Giancarlo Stanton going to the Yankees when he was like, there's no way he's going to the Yankees.
Yeah, and then he's wrong all the time, and it's great.
I mean, it's what it is for me is because I'm like a day-to-day guy is that, and not that like I was on board every single day, but I kind of was these last 3 months, especially with the Yankee playoff run. It was fun. It was exciting. But like after the Super Bowl, after the NFL playoffs, but he'll be back in time before the Masters, hopefully, and the NCAA title. So, or maybe just right around that time, and baseball will start. So we'll have Mike again. But it's just, what am I going to do?
Well, my favorite thing with Mike on this Richard Deitch podcast. So he was saying that one of the things he really wants to do is make sure he can get his picks out each week. He goes, because people keep asking me about the picks. They're saying, we'll pay for them, we'll do this. And I'm sitting there going, are you kidding me?
But got to know the history. I mean, he was running errands for Jimmy the Greek. So that's
I know that. But like, then there was that great story about how he picked the Giants to beat the San Francisco 49ers. And he's like, they'll win by like 20. They're going to have a great game. They're going to win. 49ers win. He comes in the next day and says, yeah, I was wrong on that, but you know what? I blame my driver, Julio, because Julio's a huge 49ers fan, and he kept telling me how ready the team was and all this, and then people are going, wait a sec. So, in true Francesa, wait a second. So, you're telling me we're going to pay for your picks that you are maybe or maybe not getting from your driver on the way into work, and so apparently he's going to go on Bill Simmons' podcast to give his picks. But that's been one of my favorite things is I listen to Bill Simmons as much as I used to listen to Mike and the Mad Dog, and I still listen to Mike, but not on the live show. I listen on the podcast where they put out like the opens or the interviews. I'll listen there. I do miss the calls because you don't really get those in there unless it's some special one, and they're not usually very special. But I've loved when Simmons has come on, and all Mike says is, I think this guy has the great mind in sports right now. He knows it. He gets it. But then every time Simmons comes on, Mike literally asks him a question and then tells the answer over him while he's trying to answer. And it's just, it's phenomenal because I think Mike just likes, much like Donald Trump, he likes when people blow smoke up his ass, and that's when he lets them in. But then by letting them in, he's just going to talk over them anyway because it's just he comes from a certain place in time where that's what you did to get ahead. And so I can't blame him for it. That's how he was. That's how he came up through the system. You had to be like this. And I think now that we're transitioning to a time of more conversational stuff where people are not as argumentative except when they're forcing it on TV, that it almost feels like an anachronism. It almost feels like a dinosaur, but it's a lovable, endearing dinosaur that we want to try to fit into it and build around it because we like the guy so much for whatever reason.
Well, no, he's one of a kind. No one will replace him, and that's what's so great about it is that, people like original people. People like authentic people. People like, not forced. And Mike said that yesterday. He's like, the listeners know what's rehearsed, what's not, and that's why That's why we're talking about him right now. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why we're talking about him right now. But I mean, there are many more reasons why. But it's just so funny listening to, like, here I am, 35 years old, and a guy who I really didn't like 20 years ago, who I just didn't like at all. And I really didn't have much experience with him during that 94 run. I was a little bit too young. I didn't get really into the sports radio probably till about 8th grade, probably the following year. But yeah, it's so weird. It's like like Mike says, you can't beat Father Time or Mother Nature, and
Yep.
it's just one of those things where I don't know, just the whole. It's like kind of like a routine, not like but like going back to your alchemy point. No doubt, there is absolutely no doubt, and that's what's it's so funny how it just worked out.
Well, and they're both lesser in their roles. They're both not as good as they were together, and they're fine together. It's sort of like when the guys from Aerosmith break off and do their solo records. It's or like Led Zeppelin or big bands like that. Who kind of, or Rolling Stones, and they break off, and you get it because you kind of like them if you like them. But then when they come together, that's when it works, and that's when it's better than the sum of the parts. When they do it by themselves, it's lesser than the sum of themselves. When they do it together, they create something that's especially special.
It's so funny. I think, and to that point, it is weird though when you listen to Dog by himself. Like, I'll tune in to watch High Heat and that was the other thing. Like, I had a problem the last few years. Like, I want to listen to Mike's Open, but then I wanted to hear Dog's Open, and they were both at 1:00, and I was like, oh, what do I pick? And then obviously, it's just, I think for the time they were just so awesome, and it's like, then if you want to get it reunited, you can't force that either, So
no, you can't force it. It was a special place in time, and the only thing I would say to kind of end it, and I think I've said it on a bunch of different shows and platforms, but it's hard to discuss the importance of their show when it hit you at the right point in time. I used to go, and there was a period of time where I wasn't really working, and I was after college, where I would work at a coffee shop or do something like that, and I would literally set my day up. So I would go to the gym and I'd be there, play basketball, do all this. And then the minute it was like 5 to 1, I'd get in the car and rush home, because you knew as a true listener that the show actually started at 106. So
right.
You get there for the TV, the 106. You wanted to see the whole New York scenery in the beginning with the song. You needed the song. You needed the dog thing, like doing his whole and it's not the same by himself, but he'd do it, and you'd see Mike, who was like better than it, so he'd come walking in the door like halfway through that big build up, and he almost looked like, nothing could be bothered, like, whatever, I'm here. And he'd sit down, and you would see him like, you think of the shows and you see him with like the pen hitting his mouth or drinking all his Diet Coke, Dog like sitting over the console, them talking about movies, them talking about like books, them talking about the Truman book, and like they have no standing for it, but they acted like they were geniuses for that stuff too. And I think about the times where Dog would say something crazy, and then there would be a silence, and he'd go, "Say something funny, Mike." And Mike wouldn't have anything funny to say, but it would be funny because he'd just be like, yeah, he's not buying any jewelry with that. It was like nothing that was funny, but you laughed anyway because of the build-up. I mean, the whole show was just. I mean, when I was in, when I was in London in 2004, I went with my dad in October of 2004, I believe, on a business trip he had to do, and it was in the midst of the Yankee collapse to the Red Sox, and so I'm over there, and there's no way to get the show as available as you can now. There was nothing really on demand about it. They did have a audio stream, but like you couldn't. It wasn't like you had a mobile device. So I remember after seeing that loss, and I hooked my computer up to the internet in the hotel, and it was maybe 6-7 hours ahead in London. And I remember finding the time to make sure I was there at the 1:00 Eastern time, because I had to hear how Mike and the Mad Dog, what they thought about that game ending and their story of being there. And I needed their point. I couldn't not have their point. And that to me is when you have something special. A lot of people feel that way, and I have felt through certain times about Howard Stern with that. I've fallen back because of it almost has a podcast aspect too, so I end up falling like 8 episodes behind, so it's not so much that. And I also think you grow up and you look for new people to be your curators, and you're always searching for that. But there was just a magical time where everything they said mattered.
you hung on to it. And it was like, I remember I was at the Point and Still, a bar in Hackensack, New Jersey in 2008. And I remember getting the official word. I remember it was late at night, and I didn't want to believe it because the Barclays tournament was coming to Ridgewood Country Club, and I knew Mike and the Mad Dog were going to be there together. And then I remember I was at that bar, and the crawl came across. It came across the Yes Network. Yeah, Chris Russo's leaving. And it was like the Tuesday or Wednesday before, and then I show up to the country club, and it's just Mike, and I was just like, it's sad to admit, but I was crushed. It's really sad. But other people would know that, and that's okay. But to your point, the importance of that show is just incredible. In
my brother's best man speech at my wedding, he said he had all these. He got me good, and one of them was he said, before Melanie, the biggest breakup Matt had ever been a part of was Mike and the Mad Dog. And it was well done. But yeah, I mean, it was special. And I often think if they stayed together, would I have still been as hung on at this point as I was then, or would I have grown out of it as I sort of have, where they're still part of the mix? Dog is not part of the mix just because he being in Sirius, he's national. I don't really believe by himself in Dog's opinions a lot of times, but I'll see his things come up on Sirius because I'll have SoundCloud pieces where he yells about stuff. But Mike has hung on as the better single individual. But that's just why I get that. But there's also but I think Dog's baseball stuff is sometimes better than Mike. I think Dog's baseball stuff is a little bit more. It's a little bit more national, and it's a little bit more modern, if that makes any sense. Whereas Mike kind of hangs on to these old. You were talking about you had to be at a certain time. Where I think Dog's a little bit more modern to the aspect, because he gets ripped on by Brian Kenny all the time for the sabermetrics and the metrics and all that, and he's not into that. But there's a little bit of that going on, whereas Dog is kind of maybe let that in a little bit more. It's just I don't know. It's just it's What a Time. It's the last few shows. Are you going to be tuning in on Friday to listen to his last show or no? I probably. I
have the day off, so I'm gonna tune in.
I imagine a lot will be brought in through the podcast feed too. But I did hear him in the interview say that nobody's going to be around. There's going to be no one in the studio. No one's going to come with them. Just call us, and that'll be
horse.
I think that'll be worth. Yeah, I probably will listen to it. But it's funny, in this new on-demand era, you got to remember. Like, I could be listening to a podcast, and I go, oh my gosh, it's 1:00.
Yeah, but you got like 12 devices to remind you, so you shouldn't forget.
I know. Just got to set them. Nothing's doing it for me. So, all right, well, we'll see how it goes, and maybe we can see how that went, and when Mike makes any announcements, maybe it'll be the time when we do our next post New Year podcast after the playoffs, and we'll talk about all that stuff. So this turned into a longie, but you got to get yourself to work and get to your sports stuff, your sports media work. So we'll pick it up after the new year.
Awesome, man. Merry Christmas to you and your family. Happy New Year. And 2018 should be exciting. Looking forward to it.
We are officially saying Merry Christmas on this podcast now, just to let you know. All right. We'll see. See you later.
See ya.